Every week on the Totally Advertising podcast, we meet with founders, CEOs, writers, and directors to talk about the creative choices that have made the biggest impact on their brands. And this isn't just any podcast because
it's totally advertising.
I'm Dallin Koski.
And I'm Damian Dayton.
It's totally rad. It's totally advertising.
And welcome back to the Totally Advertising podcast. I'm your host, Damian Dayton, joined by my co-host, Dallin Koski. I'm the creative guy.
And I'm the performance guy.
And we talk every week about the intersection of creative and performance. And we're excited to have Tracy Smith with us from STM Goods. Welcome to the show, Tracy.
I'm not worthy. But I'm glad to be here. This is great.
It's been great following you and looking at the way you've integrated AI personally on your LinkedIn platform. We've become, the great thing about having a podcast, it just gives you an excuse to hang out with friends. I can either do lunch or say, hey, come over and let's record this, as though it's valuable. But
Yeah, this is business. We're doing business. This is work.
I'm going to expense this,
Yeah.
And I can only do so many business lunches before, I'm starting to feel it right here. We thought we'd get into it right away with just as marketing professionals, taking a look at what other people are doing out in the marketing world and talking about it, the good, the bad, and the not so great about it. And let's just get into it. This ad I saw a couple of months ago, and I thought it was interesting for a couple of reasons, and we'll talk about it. Here, I'll play it now. So interesting commercial. They obviously don't need any help from us to push their brand, GMC Hummer. They had the power of the U.S. military behind their vehicle. What do you think of the spot?
I like it. Overall, I like it. Yeah, I'm a Hummer fan. I own a Hummer. I own one of the originals, the H2s.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I've long been a Hummer fan. I love the brand. I love the image. I love the car itself is fantastic. The EV is a cool reinvention of it. I was a little worried. A lot of times you get sequels to things that ruins the original. Mm-hmm. And while this is definitely a different beast than what they originally had, I thought they did a good job of reinventing the Hummer. Mm-hmm. So this spot, I come into this spot with a little bit of warmth anyway.
Yeah, about the brand.
I'm a brand loyalist to it. From an advertising perspective, I think they've done a good job of speaking to the features, which I think this product, because Hummer is already kind of a known and beloved brand, to a lot
you have
extent.
Strong feelings one way or another. There's not a people like, it's okay. You either love the Hummer or people shouldn't have big cars, but.
Or they love the chunkiness of it or they hate the chunkiness of it. Yeah, you're totally right. It absolutely divides the crowd. Mm-hmm. So they've got a luxury that a lot of brands or products may not have. And that is that they have a massive foundation of brand to build on. They have legacy to build on. So they don't really have to tell the Hummer story per se. Mm-hmm. I think what they do here is they tell the gear story, the tech story, which really is the story of this new Hummer. I mean, there's the crab walk thing is beyond cool and completely ridiculous because really how often are you going to use that? Yeah. But there's the tech aspect of that car is it really harkens to the origins of what Hummer was, because coming off the Humvee was the reinvention of the Jeep for the military.
Oops, sorry, didn't mean to hit play again. Sorry.
Let's watch it again. I also dig about this. There's some good energy to it. It's very masculine and it's very aggressive, which the machine itself is very masculine and aggressive. So they've paired that well. I think it's missing a little in story. And there's a little bit of romance even as they build up the music and a lot of the fast-paced photography I think it's missing a little bit of the romance of it that they could lean on a little bit.
Well, let me stop and ask, these are what I call the Super Bowl questions, people won't hear this episode till long after the Super Bowl, but after, whenever people watch a Super Bowl ad, I ask them 4 questions, and you've already answered 2 of them. My first one I ask people is, oh, did you like that ad? Okay, yeah, you gave us a lot of reasons. The second one is, who was it for? Very clear. It was for, and a lot of times you get like 50%. Some ads are so too clever for their own good, and you don't remember what the product is. And so I thought, yeah, you have no doubt. It's like, what does the product do? What does the product do? They really hit, because I think of what you said, they have, people know the Hummer and they know the Hummer brand. I think what's interesting, as a large brand, most large brands are focused on just branding. Like, let's tell the GMC story. And as a big brand, they could say, we're just going to make a commercial about this one feature of our electric. This doesn't even really sell that it's an electrical vehicle.
No.
I mean, this was the announcement that it's an electrical vehicle, but this ad is all around the crab walk, which really you can use for parallel parking. I mean, I don't know. But are you going to spend, 6 figures on a vehicle that can parallel park just based on that feature? Maybe, but I think there's no doubt that they took that as I think there's a lesson to be learned here, that they, even as a big brand, there's still a place to talk about a feature in an interesting way. They had a custom music track made, which is not cheap. Mm-hmm. They showed the visuals of the button pushing, and then they connected that with the electric nature and all these other things that they could do. That was interesting.
It's interesting, the repositioning of the electric too, because when this concept came, it was all about it being electric. And at the time, Tesla was surging, and so other brands were just piling on, trying to get in on that action. Mm-hmm. The market performance outside of Tesla sells like crazy. They still have waiting lists for their vehicles, but outside of that, EVs don't sell. Mm-hmm. And a lot of brands have pulled back dramatically on their inventory of EVs because they haven't captured the magic that Tesla has. And I'm not surprised that that's not heavily leaning into the electric side of it, because there's a bit of a softness in the market for that right now.
Well, we, especially with founders and entrepreneurs, we talk a lot about product market fit. And Jay, the founder of our company, he talks about product marketing fit, which I think a lot of the EV vehicles have been pushing either a green story, like the very first electrical vehicle stories, like these are more responsible, sustainable, whatever. I think one of the things that Tesla did is, this is a cooler car. Mm-hmm. This is a faster car, better acceleration, more torque. Here's some tricks that it can do. Mm-hmm. And so I think they picked up a little bit of that. But notice there was no sense of greenwashing. No. Even though the Hummer, like that's, I think, one of the things why it becomes a lightning rod is a lot of people use that as an example of not a green vehicle. It's the opposite end of the spectrum. So here they are doing this both. And I think they're trying to figure out, well, what is it that makes you want to buy an electrical vehicle? Now, you're looking at getting an electrical vehicle yourself.
I've owned a Tesla before, and then I switched to a truck right when gas prices went through the roof. So that was great.
To the Cybertruck or a different
truck? I'm one of the few who like the Cybertruck. I'm probably not going to buy one, but I've been looking at like the Ford Lightning.
I would say there's a lot.
There's a lot.
There's a lot of. Yeah. And my little boy, you can't say his L's or his R. Like every time he sees one, Tesla.
Oh yeah. I think that this was a great spot because it, to me, catered kind of towards that Cybertruck purchaser, where they're taking two kind of segments where you have the electrical or the electric. You've got me saying electrical vehicle now. Electric vehicle people, that have bought a Tesla, and then I switched to a truck, which felt like totally opposite, and I love both. And then you kind of pair both together, and that's a new thing for a lot of people. And so I think you're right. You're both right. Where it's like on one hand, they thought, oh hey, we're gonna hop onto this gravy train and we're gonna go electric, and they were missing a lot of kind of the infrastructure that Tesla had built up with the charging network and all of that. And so Ford's tried to get, they bought into that and some of those things, but they're not selling them. You can get a great deal on a Ford Lightning right now, but
any F-150 but Lightning's more so.
Yeah, but you can definitely, I think for me, there can be one or two features that sell a whole vehicle. you know, that you're just like, I want to have that one thing that it does. And yeah, maybe it's not the crab walk, but also, I mean, if you've ever driven a Tesla, it's incredible. Just an electric vehicle feels like a more natural driving experience to me. You know, you press down on the gas pedal, it immediately goes. You let off the gas pedal, it starts to slow down. It just feels like a more natural driving experience. So if you can take, you know, a big, comfy, you know, sort of couch on wheels like a modern Hummer and merge it with sort of the modern, you know, EV stuff, I think it'd be an amazing vehicle to drive. But they didn't just focus on the EV side, like you said. They focused on the features of it, which and it was kind of in that Cybertruck vein.
Well, honestly, I feel like that is the challenge that all these car companies are figuring. There's reasons why people would want electric car, but they don't know how to tell the right story. So you look at like Hyundai's line of electric cars, and they're trying to look like uber futuristic, like it's a spaceship.
Mm-hmm.
And then Tesla just kind of took a very traditional sedan look for their cars, and they just kind of smoothed out the lines and made it look nice. But they really sold on performance and look at all these neat tricks. We talked about how they don't have a lot of traditional advertising, but what you could see in the early days were a lot of videos on whatever platform of people like, oh, I'm going to eat a pizza while I'm driving, and so it can do these things. And like, I don't really care how it's powered. That's a nice to have, but I can care what it does for my life. And I think it's interesting that these multi-billion-dollar conglomerates haven't figured out they know the pain that electric vehicles solves, but they're still trying to figure out, well, what is the itch that it scratches that makes a consumer say, I want that.
Mm-hmm. You know, there some to that point in what you were saying about the two different trucks. If you look on the internet and you follow the Cybertruck at all, like a lot of the feedback and criticism, especially from traditional truck owners, is that it's not really as rugged as a traditional truck is. It may have the power, it may have the torque, but can you take that thing out to Moab and really rock that with a Cybertruck? And that's the criticism against the Cybertruck. Well, that Hummer ad right there, it starts you in an urban setting and you're parallel parking around the garbage truck or whatever. But they are quickly out into the wild, and they're banging through Moab and Sonora type stuff that I think they're saying this is the EV truck that the Cybertruck can't deliver.
This is everything that it's not, but it does have the future techno cyberness to it.
Yeah.
For me, the Cybertruck, honestly, it's the truck bed, because all my truck experience was working on a ranch in Wyoming. We'd always need to load up that bed with so many things that would hang over. And so that slant on the back was like, well, that obviates the need for your truck bed entirely, because unless it fits inside, it won't work. Sorry, that's a minor thing. But I think it is also saying, oh, you're realizing people want trucks for vastly different reasons. Some people need it to get a very specific job done, and some people. So I think the opposite case is interesting with Ford Maverick, which is a small little EV truck that the price is shot through the roof on. And from the truck community had tons of criticism. This isn't a real truck. This is small. But the people who have them absolutely love them. They're kind of for people who kind of want a truck, but mostly need to get to work and back.
Totally, yeah.
But they want to have a dirt bike. They work on projects. Gets great mileage. It's actually got some nice styling on the inside. Are very pragmatic, and they start at a super low price. And I think that's the opposite use case from the Cybertruck actually, and it fills that niche of look at how pragmatic and hybrid vehicle can become. And I've got to the place where I kind of want one. You're not going to get like truck lovers that are like impressed with you at all. You're not going to be like that guy in your street that has a Raptor in the driveway who never goes off-roading.
Who never uses it.
But he wants to know you to know that he can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, so it doesn't hit that macho vein.
Yeah.
But it's a tool that does what it needs to do. And that's what I thought was interesting. So often people are like either trying to tell just a brand story or all our features, that a big brand would pick one feature really and use that as an example of all the things we can do electronically. But I don't know, it might have still been a miss, because I don't know if that one feature was the feature that gets me to, but it does harken back to, like, you said you got the original H2, but I remember when people were converting the original military Hummers to, And the thing that made them unique was that super high axle. So you had extra clearance, but that made them really wide, but you couldn't sit in the middle because the axle went down the middle of the vehicle. And then the H2s kept that size, but you didn't have that high axle anymore. So you kind of, and so I think the Hummer story is a lot about what your wheels can do and where your wheels can take you. So,
and it's about, like, in reality, people that own Hummers own them because they're imposing. Like, it's an imposing vehicle. And the EV, they've done a good job of keeping it that way. It's still a very tall vehicle. It's very profound on the road. It's not as profound as a Cybertruck, but a Cybertruck isn't imposing. It's imposing visually, but it's not imposing from a size perspective.
Yeah. You don't feel big in it.
Yeah.
And that's, yeah, you feel safe in an SUV, which is why more and more people, because they're like,
It's funny you say that. That's why I don't want the Cybertruck, because I'm 6'6", and that's why I like driving trucks, and why I didn't like the Tesla. In the trucks, I just feel like I'm sitting on my couch. And the Cybertruck, they were saying is going to be as big as an F-150, which I drive now, and it doesn't feel that way. It looks like it's not big enough. I want it to be bigger. So me personally, that's one of the reasons I didn't go for it.
Something interesting about the ad. I don't know what the fourth question you were going to say about this
the fourth
is,
one
but
is, are you interested in buying one?
oh, interested.
Because if you go
So-
into an ad, you're like, oh, I love that ad. People forget what it's about, who it's for most of the time. Most commercials, you lose 50% of people on that question. This one, you definitely remembered who it was for. What do they do is the second. What features, how is it that different? And the last one is, do you think you'd want to buy one after seeing that commercial?
Yeah.
It increased my desire to buy one. I'm not their target demo, but if somebody's like, hey, do you want to try this out?
It's like a cool car. Yeah.
I want to try that. And I totally want to push that button. Like, I want to see what that experience, that Crowdbox experience is like.
You know what's different about this one? And especially for a Super Bowl ad. Like, Super Bowl ads are supposed to be the big splash and the big share. Like, they want people, the Super Bowl has a lot of viewership. You get a lot of eyeballs at the Super Bowl.
123 million last.
All at once, right there. But if you do it right, you potentially could get 1 billion or more, because people take this and then they share it on their own channels, and you start absorbing other audiences through other people's social, usually is what it's from. When they first announced the Hummer EV, that was absolutely shareable. And they showed a lot of the same features. They did a lot of the same storytelling. I don't know that this one is shareable. This is a great reminder ad. This is a great one to, kind of
It's
wet your
like
palate again.
It's almost
Yeah.
a direct response ad.
Yeah. It's
Just
true.
about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's,
There's
you're already
nobody
kind of
that-
in the market.
Nobody's going to be like, oh, did you see that commercial? Nobody's going to talk about it. But did it effectively accomplish its objective? I wish I had.
It was a
data
good
on
reminder.
sales. I feel like this is not the type of commercial I make. I think they accomplished their objective really well. But yeah, it's not that shareable.
It's not going viral.
Not going viral.
No.
It's there's a certain traditionality to it as far as like an automotive ad.
Yeah.
You get the big overhead shots and you get the swinging shots as the thing rips by with its tire turn and sand blowing out the side. That's classic automotive advertising.
Which they kind of need to do to say, this is like other.
Yeah, you put it in a
does
category.
All the truck stuff.
Yeah.
It can do all the truck stuff.
And there's something like what you guys do is fantastic advertising. And you have this really wonderful, we'll call it unique. It's not entirely unique, but you have kind of a unique spin to what you do relative to what traditional advertising, TV advertising might be. It's a little bit more long form. It's much more suited to a customer that's scrolling and is wanting to absorb information. But there's something to be said about tried and true in advertising. Like I'm all about innovation. I push for innovation. That's just the way my brain is oriented. And so I'm always pushing for that new way of doing something, new way of looking at something, trying to carve a unique something out of whatever I'm working with. But having that formula that's been proven decade after decade after decade, you can see that they borrowed from that. And while I'm a fan of originality, there's something to be said about using the tools that work and letting them work. I mean, part of that you could say is like Creatably, you guys use humor to your advantage. And then there's a formula of how you introduce the product through the comedic story, which is really good. You follow a formula that I think is probably an infomercial turned into education, which I think is fantastic the way you do it. So you're also following a little bit of a formula that's been
Oh yeah, we all
tested
come
over
from a
time.
tradition. Yeah, absolutely. But you can take advantage of what's been done. We like to say control for the variable. It's like do something new, but if everything's a variable, then you don't know what actually worked there. And so we try to, each ad, we hopefully are doing something new, something that's, I remember my first, like, I had been in production for like 20 years before I started getting into marketing. And the first campaign I did was for a local film, and where I was in charge of all the marketing budget. And I was like, oh, I better not screw this up. But I had big ideas I wanted to do. So I just took a look at the last 3 campaigns that are on, okay, I need to at least do these things that they've done. And if I can, even these things that I don't think are effective, I need to do them so they can't point at, well, you didn't do the things that we've done before, so that's why this failed. So I need to do at least those things. And whatever you want to say about our ads or videos or whatever, we're now getting more and more into letting clients know, yeah, you need to have a robust ecosystem of ads, and you need to be doing some of the reason those things are traditional is because they work and they're solid, and whatever the hot new nutritional supplement is, you still need 4 square meals a day, you know? And I think a lot of that is doing the right things, you know?
Well, it's interesting the way that you point out that, like, design for the variable. That, as a performance guy, Dallin here, the performance guy, and then Damien, the creative. Like, it's usually the performance guy that wants the variables controlled, and you're on creative and you're looking at the variable in that sense. Like, I think that's a lot of what makes you guys as good as you are. It's because most creatives don't think scientifically, they don't think mathematically. They think in big pictures, they think in stories, they think in creativity. And yet, when you can have an underlying kind of science or formula to your creativity, that's what I've found in my career, is that's where the magic happens. And so I've been blessed in my career is that I'm able to go analytic, and I'm also able to go very creative and, you know, go both directions on that. That's made it very effective for me as well. But a lot of creatives don't think that way. And so that's good that you have that.
Well, yeah, I think everybody has to find that. There has to be, we say that tension keeps the tense up, but we've got to push and pull on each other, and you need to learn it for yourself too. And like, I want our creatives to be rewarded by seeing a crazy idea work and understanding how it works. And his performance people are like, we need more creative. And we say, instead of saying whether it worked or not, I need to be able to say, how did this work? Mm-hmm. How didn't it work? Even a successful campaign, it can be missing some things. And so as we critique these ads, it's not like this is a good ad or bad ad. It's more like, okay, so if you had this in a campaign doing this, what other pieces do you need?
Also, something I say often is there's no such thing as good or bad marketing. It's how effective was it to the objective.
Yeah.
It's marketing is marketing. And if you put marketing out, there will be some effect. And even something like the Bud Light disaster, that was actually good marketing to an audience. It just wasn't very effective marketing to their core audience.
And it was negative to their core audience.
Yeah, so there was an effect there. How effective was it? It was less effective for that audience, probably fairly effective for the audience that Mulvaney was part of. But the point wasn't it wasn't just that it was bad or good. You have to look at the effectiveness of it. So I totally agree with that.
So we sometimes say the most dangerous thing your ad can do is be ignored.
Agreed.
And people don't, but nobody's going to make fun of your ad for being ignored. Nobody's going to talk about the ads that are ignored, but that's actually their biggest risk, especially for young companies, if you make stuff that nobody sees, you know. Let's talk about your experience a little bit right now. Tell us about who you work for and what you guys do.
So I'm Chief Brand Officer at STM Goods. It's a company out of Australia. We do accessories for consumer electronics, like for iPhones, iPads, MacBooks, anything from protective cases to protective bags to charging accessories. So it's kind of a variety of things for people that are within an Apple or Microsoft ecosystem.
So you guys have some really cool accessories. It's a pretty crowded market, though. A lot of people are making accessories for mobile devices and tablets. How do you guys stand out? What do you do to try to stand out? I have my theory, but I want to hear what you guys think.
I'd be curious to hear your theory, because I have my answer, and it's the answer I give every time. I'm curious what your theory is.
Well, I want to hear your answer first, then I'll tell you my theory.
Okay, so our slogan is smarter than most. And the reason it's smarter than most is that we put engineering and planning and design and innovation into our products. It all starts with what is the problem that the customer has, and we design around that, and that's what springs products out. And so where there's a lot of commoditization within some of our categories, we look at differentiating to the point of rising above the commodity and giving someone a reason to not just buy it, but to love using it. And so that, even though that sounds like what everybody does, that is not what everybody does. And you can look at a lot of our competitors, and it's a very crowded space. So there's a lot of competitors, and then there's just a lot of ankle biters that come into the space and just, like
we're cheap
Chinese factory and stuff like that. But even a lot of our competitors really don't bring that. They're bringing the ordinary, the expected, and we bring more than that.
I think the big competitors in the space are always trying to like cool wash stuff. We'll do it, but we'll make ours cooler than everybody else's. But when you get down, it's like $60 for that cord now. Oh, this cord can also do this? So I was going to say, I want to hit two things that you said that I really loved. I love your tagline. I'm a big tagline junkie. Smarter than most. Let me dissect it for a little bit.
Go for it.
What I love about it. I love that there's some braggadocio and confidence there, but just enough humility that it's not like, well, they're cocky, because everybody does feel like their stuff is the best. It's kind of like, we're podcasting from Utah in the 90s. The Utah slogan was, Utah, a pretty great state. And I loved that, just a bit of humility. It's like, it's pretty good. If that's what you're into, we're pretty good at it. You like hiking? We're pretty great. But smarter than most is like, I'm sure there's somebody smarter than us. But compared to most people, we stand out. I love that slogan.
I'm smiling because that's designed in it.
Yeah,
You're catching that, and I love that.
I was going to say product innovation. Product innovation, how you stand out by having a feature that nobody else has or an approach that nobody else has. As I happened to be on a trip yesterday and I needed some accessories that I hadn't brought with me. It was like fly in, fly out sort of situation. So I ran to a Best Buy, and on the wall of goods, there's no greater sense of commoditization than you go to one of these places and they all look the same. And it's like, these guys offer color, these guys offer cheap. Oh, this can do something that I really need that nobody else does,
That's our ethos right there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the products that I ended up buying, I just needed a charging cord. But I was like, oh, but this solves a very specific charging cord need, which is I have an older phone. My wife has a newer phone. We like it to have a cord in the car, and it had a charger for both of them. And it was really nice.
So you are describing the other side of our tagline.
Okay.
Is it speaks to our products. It also speaks to the customer that we do products for. So we don't design for the customer who doesn't care what it is as long as it does the job. That's not our customer. We design for the customer that is the Tesla buyer. We design for the customer that buys their mattress through the mail. We design for the customer who uses an app for just about everything they do, because they are looking for smarter ways of doing things. That's our customer. The way that you're describing your experience in the store is you're our customer. You are smarter than most.
Well, the funny thing is I wasn't looking for, I want this that does this. But I'm like, as long as I'm going to do this, I have this other problem that's been bothering me. If any of these could happen to solve that, that would, and I was like, oh yeah, this looks nicer, all the other stuff. But we talk a lot about the emotional purchaser and the logical purchaser. And I think we make our purchasing decisions with emotions, but that puts it in this want category. But then I need a reason that justifies it. And so I think some people can put it first, but I need like, oh, that justifies the extra $10 because I can do 3 more things with it or whatever it is.
I would argue that no one puts the logic first. Literally no one. Even the most logical person, they're doing that because that logic brings peace to them. They seek the peace of the logic. So it is always emotionally driven when we're making these decisions. And I challenge anybody to show me otherwise. I'll show you it's not. We are constantly seeking the settling emotion. And we either want the unsettled emotion of excitement, and horror movies will do that. We want to be thrilled, or we want something that brings us down into peace. It's one or the other. You're going one or the other. So when we design product, we try to create something, a reaction called curious delight. That's what we refer to it as. We want somebody to look at it and go like, oh. And all of a sudden they feel lifted and comforted at the same time. So they get a little bit of thrill and they get a little bit of that peace. So that's what we always shoot for. And, you know, like this Hummer ad, it does a lot of the same thing. I think all the tech that it describes in there gives you the, it's tech worthy. It's something I can trust.
Yeah.
There's technology here. And
it
then all the
definitely
rest
for
of
me
it
drives
is
that
thrill.
curiosity, because I was saying I want to go in and push that button and see what that experience is like.
Yeah.
There's so what I find interesting about your role, you mentioned you're over product and marketing, right? What a lot of people are saying that one of the big sort of trends will be for this year and probably years to come is that like sort of the new marketing is product development, you know, putting out new products. And one thing that I thought was really cool that you said is that you design products that, you know, you have new features or new things on them that gets people to want to buy it, but also you want people to use it and love it. And I think a lot of people just focus on what can we tweak with our product to get them to buy it, you know, on a shelf or, you know, in the Amazon collection page, what's going to be just slightly different. But you're also focusing on what's going to get people to use it and love using it and then refer their friends. How do you kind of think about that? Usually you have separate people for marketing and product. Somebody, you know, the marketer kind of picks up their role after the product's been delivered and it's ready to go. But you're kind of thinking about it all together. And I love how you kind of phrased it. So A, do you feel like, you know, with where marketing is going, product development is kind of that new big thing? And B, how do you think about, you know, kind of blending those two things together, like getting customers to come back and buy again and refer it to their friends because they love using it, and making sure that it moves, that it's differentiated enough to actually sell?
A few things about what you just said. The best marketing always starts at product. The best marketing always starts at product. So if your product doesn't have marketing built into it from the beginning, your marketers are going to have to really do a lot of lift, which can be done. You can sell a remarkable amount of garbage in this world with really good marketing. It works. It generally works short term because people will get it in their hands. They'll realize it's garbage. They don't go back for more. So ideally you have something that they come back for more, or they tell their friends about, or you get that kind of build from it. But you want marketing that starts at product. And so it's good that we're united across those two sometimes segmented brands. It helps to have someone like me who has a mind for both and has an objective for both that can unify that, because a lot of times you do get departmental friction if you don't. But even if you don't, if there's principles involved where you understand that product ultimately is what is being marketed and there is marketing built into it, you can design better. When you don't have that, that's how you end up with commodity. So we have an interesting balance of letting our product be the marketing, but then putting marketing on top of it. In our channels, a lot of our marketing is done either through direct sales. So we are buyer to buyer, or salesman to buyer, salesperson to buyer, or we are...
when you say that, you're talking salesman to buyer being a retailer, or to like a college that wants 38 or a 300.
Yep.
What do you mean?
Both of those.
Both of those. Okay.
So we're in retail, and we're also in some of the institutional channels like education, some commercial like B2B, where they're putting out, you know, whole fleets, deploying fleets of devices. So you are dealing with the procurement officer, a retail buyer, or an administrator in a school system. So a lot of times it happens direct person to person. Some of the marketing will happen at trade shows and other things, but for a lot of times we are in brick and mortar stores, we're in Targets, we're in Best Buys, we're in, you know, whatever store we're in. There's packaging, like that's our marketing. Is you have this, you know, however big your packaging is, whether it's half a square foot or it's a square foot of billboard to tell your story on. And there's a lot that you have to tell. And so it becomes the real challenge is what kind of story do you tell, and how do you tell the story right? And how do you tell it differently apart from what the other guys are doing? And how do you be the one that grabs their eye before the other one does?
Yeah, and context is everything, because you're sitting on a shelf next to your competitors. If you're the cheap device, you want to look like everybody else. If you're different, you've got to look different, but you almost need to, when you're developing your packaging, not just look at it like, oh, that's a cool design. I now need to go into the stores and put it on the shelf next to them and see. And I always say, I think this is true if you're discussing literature or marketing, if you don't think context matters, try drinking orange juice after you brush your teeth.
Nice.
You know, it tastes totally right? And it's like, what is it? But I think that totally matters. I think a good example of that is Sunbum, as just suntan lotion. But if you go and look at the sunscreen aisle at Walgreens, they all look the same, and there's this cute, and it stands out, and you see, you know, like, oh, I want to. It makes me consider it. It opens, you know, and especially where you have a feature that other people don't. I'm looking for a phone case, but I also want it to do this. So I need to say Scream phone case, and, you know, and how do you do that?
Yeah, and it's interesting where we sit. We're a relatively mature brand that operates like a startup. We're still scrappy. We're still, you know, quite agile, but we've been in the business for quite a long time. We're established in a lot of our channels. A lot of companies, like startups, they'll come in and they have a channel. And a lot of times it is direct to consumer online, or it's even B2B, but it's online driven. And you have one customer, one target customer that you are pounding on to get there. And so you can understand them very clearly. For any company like ours, where you work both D2C, but you also work through a buyer who is not the consumer, they are buying for a space within whatever their territory is, whether that's a place in a store, whether that's a place on a .com. They have to protect that and make it perform. You have two very different incentives with your customers. So we have two different customers. So we have to, as far as a brand goes, we have to play to both of those customers in what we do. Now, what makes that complex, as Damien, you know, is when you have two different customers, two different people, two different psychologies that you're trying to talk to in a single ad, it gets muddled. It gets less effective. I will tell pretty much any new brand that you need to be loud. You need to be almost obnoxiously loud. Because like you said, to be ignored is death for a new brand. You have to get out there. You have to annoy people so that you can get in the face of people that will embrace you. But when you're a mature brand and when you work through those different channels, to be overly annoying is to offend the very gatekeepers that allow you to the customer that might like your annoyance.
Yeah.
So it's a really difficult line to walk, which a lot of times will curtail a certain intensity of our marketing that would be there otherwise.
Well, that buyer, their number one motivation, if like on that gut level, when I talk about the itch, it's like that first, whatever brings you an instinct. They are motivated by having sales and success for but their biggest fear is making the decision that gets them fired.
That's exactly it.
So if they decide to pick the loud brand and then they sink, then they're screwed. And so they're worried about that. But, you know, Jeff Curl told an interesting story at Silicon Slopes. There was a local, you know, tech event here. He said as they took Skull Candy to market, people weren't picking them up because they weren't but it was actually a Radio Shack buyer that was the first to give him a chance. And he's like, well, Sony and Bose and all the headphones that we have are all competing on these same three values. And you look different on the shelf. And so these all look exactly the same on the shelf. And I just want to have something that looks different. And I'm willing to knock one of them off, our lowest performer off, and give you a chance because you at least look different on the shelf. And you're not competing on sound quality or anything else. It's like black and silver, everything else was black and silver, and they had red headphones or gold headphones or whatever they were doing at the time, you know.
When you look at retail, when you look at the challenge that retail has, that right there is the solution to the problem that retail has. And too many of the retail brands are too baked in tradition and too baked in that old scarcity mindset of if you bring it in and something goes wrong on your category, you're fired. It creates this sense of fear amongst them rather than this sense of industry where they're saying, just like that example, I already have these brands. And by the way, all these brands are on Amazon. They're on their own sites. They're on every other site. Why do they have to come to my store to get these brands? They might come here out of convenience, maybe the local audience, but I'm not getting the scale. But what if I have something different that nobody else has, that when they are in my store, there's something that is this treat of them finding something, having that curious delight? That's where retail can become something different than what it is currently suffering in its diminishing effects of holding the old incumbency approach and allowing the fear of the buyers to really hold back the growth that they could be having.
Well, and we are hearing from more, as we look at our partner brands, from buyers, they're interested in our D2C brands, not like, hey, the old story used to be like, we can bring you in, but we need to offer a deep discount. They more want some of those brands because they're more recognized now, and that I can go into the retail store I like and see brands that will surprise and delight me. That 3 or 4 years ago, people used to talk about how a date night was just go to Target because you wanted to kind of discover things there. And I think other stores are recognizing we can't just be the bargain. If we want people to walk in our stores, they need to have something that's going to surprise and delight people along the way.
And that goes along with your marketing. Your marketing should be the same.
But you're also wearing a shirt that brings up an interesting point about designing marketing into your product. That's a Rowan shirt, correct?
It's a Lululemon.
Oh, Lululemon. Oh, yeah, because the 3 stitches on the sleeve say Lulu. It's just 3 stitches, but they said, let's do something unique. So when I see it, I can not just say like, oh, you look good in that shirt. It's no longer Lululemon, but you need a breadcrumb on the product that people will say like, oh, Rowan has the X's on their stitches. I mixed them up. But we just did a campaign for True Classic, a brand that's just killing it. And I'm like, their product needs a breadcrumb on it. I really want them to see something like that because I see 2 people switching a t-shirt from a regular t-shirt to a True Classic shirt, and they look awesome in their True Classic. But as they go out there into the world, nobody can tell.
It's a good point.
And I think one of our problems with Pillow Cube, which is a great pillow, people love it, they can sleep better. People don't bring their pillows out in public. So if your product is being used in the public, you have a chance to tell your brand story. And if that's not baked into your product design from the beginning, and everybody's seeing a product that does something different, and there's no breadcrumb, they're like, oh, that's a cool case and it can do that cool thing. Who is it? Like, oh, I don't know, I found it online. You have a missionary who loves the product who cannot tell the story because they don't even remember the brand.
Which is a great point because True Classic, love the brand, love what they do over there, love your spot. But where True Classic excels in the e-com space because of the way that they've done their advertising and the way that they've done their product, for sure, they absolutely know their audience. They know how to get to their audience. They know all their metrics. Those guys are dialed in.
And they make a great product too. And I think that's the most important marketing thing is the product's got to deliver on its promise.
Yeah, guys come back for their 6-packs after they, they like, I want 6, I want 10 at a time, I want 12 at a time. They're obviously doing well on product. The one thing that they're missing on is that many companies buy location so that there's advertising to their location, like having freeway frontage.
Yeah.
There's extra, you have to pay extra for that property because there's access to eyeballs. True Classic has sold hundreds of millions of these t-shirts that are location, walking all around the world, and they're missing out on that location advantage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I've said before on the podcast, the most valuable real estate you can own as a brand is living rent-free in people's brain, if you can get them. But the second is probably somewhere on your product, it should say, hey. It doesn't have to say much more than that, How valuable is the Nike swoosh, right? It doesn't have to, and we go through waves. I think Polo's a good example when you just needed to see the tiny horse to say that was an expensive shirt. And then the horse got huge and it's going through different phases of that. Okay, I want to share another example that I think is a good example of a brand that's using product development. And I'm sorry, there's also in your space, so I don't mean to give some airtime to, but you're not doing the same product that they are. New company called Clicks Keyboard. Are you familiar?
Mm-mm.
It's a phone case, but it has a built-in keyboard on it. So makes your thumb homework a little more tactile, I guess.
If you like that BlackBerry life.
Yeah, if you missed that BlackBerry, if you're about that, you want to get back to that. Or what was that one that slid open? Do you remember that? It was slid sideways.
Sidekick or something.
Yeah. If you missed that, that's what they're offering. And somebody I know got a job there, so I think I got delivered their ads early. Went to the website, and it was, I think it was a little too expensive for me at the time. But I got this email where, in a world where you're getting so many designed emails, this is the email I got. Not designed, just a text email.
Okay.
It's from the founder, but technically they had set up a new email, founder@clicks.com, but it's like, hi friend, My name is Adrian and I'm the CEO here at Clicks. I noticed you looked at Clicks but didn't buy, so I wanted to get in touch to learn more about your experience. Would you be willing to answer just a couple questions to help my team improve? Here's the link and 3-answer survey. As a young company, feedback is critical to our success. I'll send you a $30 discount on Clicks as my token of thanks. Many thanks, Adrian Lee Munching, CEO. You know, I thought that was a brilliant email because it was a survey to the non-converted. So you get a different sort of data from them. It's really easy to own your customers and get data from them. A lot of people still don't do it, but it's easy to get feedback. But they anchored the value of the survey at $30. They didn't say, I'm going to give you 30% off. It's like, I'll give you $30 as a discount on my product. But it sounds like, here's some cash, you know, on the product if you fill the survey. Then I took the survey. It was relatively simple. And I'm like, I don't know how purposeful this is, but they're making the process of product development feel seamless. And I almost bought it again. I didn't because ultimately I'm kind of in between phones. I'm not sure when I'm going to shift. And I don't know that I actually need, you know, there could be some other issues there. But it made me ask the question and churn on it, which seemed like a survey, but I think it was product development, customer service, and marketing all in one.
It's a nice mix, and that's kind of that's not unique. It was innovated a few years ago, doing that sort of thing. Once we had the tools where you could do this, it's a classic follow-up campaign. So you have bounce and abandon cart, and you have a bunch of different follow-up workflows that you can build into your web interaction once you've cookied somebody like that. So these can be very effective. And I guarantee you, if they're doing it right, they have tested that $30 versus a 30% off versus or whatever that is, a 10% off, or they've probably tested different ways of posing the same value, but giving it different words and a different appearance to your mind. So I hope they're doing it that way. If they are, that's the way to do it. If you're listening, that's the way you do it.
And I've seen, I'm getting those flows as well, you know, but they are generally, they become so designed and they have so many designers working on them. I love when it doesn't appear like a marketing email. I could easily tell a difference between that and the other picture of product, 30% off. And even if it was like a graphic, why didn't you buy? It wouldn't feel like they were really asking me that question.
What was do you have the subject line on that?
Quick Q on Click's keyboard. So that was a little marketing, but like quick, like question.
Oh, quick question. Okay.
Yeah, quick Q on Click's keyboard was the marketing line. And I'm sure I'm sure testing that.
That's probably testing that too.
Can I ask you a quick question? But also asking me a quick question is like the #1 red flag of like, oh, this is a salesperson. So I could still tell it was done in bulk, but by attaching a person to it, the subject line came from a person. It didn't, like when I went to find it, I put the company name in and all their retargeting emails came up, but this one didn't. I remembered the CEO. So I searched by name and found it. So it didn't look like it came from the same from the company. It looked like it came. So sometimes like demarketing a campaign makes it work a little. But you know, I've been on sales calls with brands doing 7 figures on like Amazon and saying things to me like, well, does email even work anymore? And I think that email is still the most effective social media platform because you don't pay nearly as much. What were you saying to me about what most e-commerce brands should expect from their email campaigns? You were kind of giving me numbers on that the other day.
Usually we see that it's between 15 and 30% of their total revenue.
Yeah. And there's some people that are completely ignoring it. And then some people that are just putting it on auto and some people that are really personalizing it and stuff. But how do you develop your products where innovation is a key part of your marketing? Do you make customers part of that? Or do your engineers, that's kind of the Apple approach, will tell you what's best for you. The opposite approach that Utah Hockey Club is taking right now. It's like, we're not sure what to call ourselves. We'll survey the audience. And that's how you get a brand like Bodie McBoatface, you know, that boat in Scotland. They said, we'll let the public decide its name. It's Bodie McBoatface now. You know, how do you guys? What's the approach that you guys like to take?
We generally do more the Apple approach. We've gone and we've studied and we've researched and we've done all this, and this is what we have provided for you. A couple of things about going to your audience is going to your audience potentially exposes your directions So it depends on your competitive situation. We have competitors that will take our stuff and try to outproduce us. So we have to be careful of that. So we don't oftentimes go to a crowdsourced inspiration sort of thing. We will reach out for feedback on certain levels, but we will not go out with a concept that indicates the direction we're going.
Absolutely.
So that's mainly the reason we don't do it, is because it's there's a little bit of, we'll call it espionage in the industry.
Yeah.
And so I think that just comes right out of, you know, the way that Apple has led the industry. And so everybody's looking for the scoop and everybody's trying to be the next best thing. And the fact that we innovate and people copy is a lot of times the direction that it goes. So believe it or not, we have competitors that will watch what STM does, and then they will try to jump in and beat us to the punch.
And do it at scale, yeah.
Yeah. And so we know that dynamic. And that's oftentimes the innovator in a space faces that as both a challenge and kind of a compliment of what they do. That's not me talking braggadociously about what we do. That's literally the way that things are done a lot of times in our, it's not to say that we innovate everything. Sometimes they innovate their own stuff too. But if you watch the patterns, it goes that way. So we're careful about, you know, giving a nod of what we're doing. So we don't do it that way for that reason.
From a marketing standpoint, my favorite approach is we care about what you have to say, but you don't get a vote, which is more like, what features would you like us to see next? And then take all that. Because the CEO of Porsche famously said, the two biggest requests we get at Porsche are, we wish they were safer and roomier. That if we listened to that, we'd be making Volvos. But then they came up with it, like that was said like 15 years ago, and they came up with a Cayenne. Like I never thought we'd see a Porsche SUV, and they found a mix that worked for them that does some of those things. But
yeah, and you have to have that. You have to have that positioning, that the little bit of arrogance, confidence, we call it. Your audience will tell you 1,000 different things, and they will all be very passionate about it. And like you say, if you let somebody else dictate who you are, you'll end up somebody else that you may not want to be. If you want to be truly a brand, you have to carve out space of your own, and you have to have vision for that. And you have to be the one that holds that vision. So you can filter what comes in, and you can be influenced by it. But I love the idea of how you're saying is like, we want to hear what you say, but you don't actually get a vote. And at the end of the day, even internally, there are components of choices that we make that I will ask internally, but I am going to make this decision because I'm the one that is leading this, and I'm the one that has been tasked to do that. And so sometimes I ignore others in the company because I don't think it fits the vision that I have for where we're going.
Well, and for all the beauties of democracy, and I love our democracy, but there are some systems that are not. I mean, the Greek term was mob rule, and it also brought about the fall of the Greek Empire because they were voting on military strategies, and it slows certain things. You cannot, not everything is a democracy, and that's not, it's good to agree on ideals democratically, but strategies and tactics should not be. We would be slowed down too much by it. There's more efficiencies that can be maintained in other different systems. So,
well, you and I talked about this. You're on the client side of things. You're an agency, you work with clients. I've done that too. I've had an agency where I worked with clients. And if you let the client dictate what you're doing, you're likely going to fail in an advertising aspect because clients aren't as much the expert on that particular discipline within marketing or growth or business as you are. And so you have to come in with a client and absorb what you can, be influenced by what you can, but then you have to hold a line against a lot of times the destructive wishes of those clients that are indulgent, they're off base, maybe they're just not accurate at all, and they could just be absolutely antithetical to what might actually work. That has to happen all the time. And so it's whether you're dealing that with your customers or whether you're dealing with that with clients, you have to filter, and then you have to stand in and be the one that has the expertise.
That's a great point.
I think there's a confidence that only comes with experience about that. When you're first in the agency world, you want to make your clients happy, and then you see that bring their demise, and pretty soon you have to say to them, this is what you want to hear, but you've hired me for my expertise, and this is what you need to hear. The decision's yours, but you've hired me for my expertise, and this is what you need to hear.
Yeah, which is, how many of us want to walk into a doctor and say, well, I kind of think the heart surgery should go like this. And the doctor say, you got it, champ, whatever you want. No, we want the doctor that says, this is the way it's going to be done. This is what's going to happen after. This is how you're going to recover. This is what I want you to do with it. That's the heart surgeon we want. That's the advertising heart surgeon that we should be, whether internally leading marketing or whether externally being an agency partner.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for coming, hanging out with us. Sorry we didn't get to eat lunch at the same time. Fascinating discussion. And if you want to hear more about advertising, subscribe to the Totally Radvertising podcast. You can check it out on Apple, Spotify, and pretty soon this should be on YouTube as well. So we'll see you next week on the Totally Radvertising podcast.
Totally rad. It's totally rad.
Join us every week right here on Spotify, YouTube, Apple, or wherever you listen to stuff for your pods.